Welcome back once again to the Hackett's Quarry Summer Camp, where what doesn't kill you probably makes you stronger. I'm your guide for this special Halloween Philosophy and Ethics in Games series, Josh Bearheart Hawk, and this week we're finding out what's really going on at Hackett's Quarry, while also raising the question, what's actually going on at Hackett's Quarry? As is standard for YouTube, there's a playlist linked in the description, that little box that no one ever really reads. And likes are always welcome alongside your subscription, since now that you've clicked on the video, you're stuck in this eternal realm of torment forever. Speaking of being stuck in an eternal realm, we're backtracking a bit from the end of the last episode to meet a couple of new characters who seem to be lost on a dark road in the middle of the night. Laura and Max are a couple of camp counselors heading to the Hackett's Quarry summer camp, but they're heading up a little early and aren't really sure where it even is. You'd think in the age of Mapquest, they would have printed out some directions, but like some dweebs from the 1980s, they're relying on a good old-fashioned paper map, and Max's sense of always knowing right where he is. Trying to get them back on track, Laura picks up the map from the back seat to try and find the summer camp, and Max decides that looking down at the useless piece of paper is better than keeping his eyes on the road. That action is just one of my least favorite things to see during any scene that takes place in a car, and it seems to be a reoccurring thing. So many games, movies, and TV shows feel the need to film or animate scenes in vehicles that include the driver taking an inordinate amount of time to look anywhere but the road. It doesn't always end in some kind of accident, but it absolutely should, because you should never take your eyes off the road, especially when driving at night down an unfamiliar stretch of road in the middle of nowhere. Not only could there be other drivers and unforeseen twists, there's also hazards like deer and other animals that make a habit of crossing roads when they see the chance to take advantage of insurance policies. A friend of mine once hit a deer on a back road that definitely wasn't there a second before, and that deer sued him out of house and home. It didn't help that the judge was a possum with rabies, but that's a story for another time. Max's decision to look away from the road ahead winds up costing him as well. By the time he looks up, there's something in the road, and he barely has enough time to react. His speed, along with a lack of knowledge and experience when it comes to brakes and steering, causes him to veer off the road. After an eternity of crashing, the car finally comes to a stop, and the pair are lucky to be alive. As Max goes to check on the damage, Laura heads to the trunk of the car to grab the toolbox. And because I just can't help but snoop in other people's bags, she also finds a letter that Max didn't want her to see. It appears his application to Landis University was rejected, and he won't be going to college this fall as a result. It's not clear why he didn't tell Laura, but we'll probably find out more later. Heading back to the front of the vehicle with the toolbox and the world's greatest phone flashlight, she helps Max for a moment before boredom and intrigue carries her off to look at more interesting things. Seriously, about the flashlight, that thing looks like a mag light coming from an old iPhone, and I just can't get over how they have that kind of lighting, but couldn't get proper cell coverage to run a map. It's just such a weird thing. Like, they could have just given us a regular flashlight and I never would have noticed. But they chose to add the power of the sun to the back of the phone, and that's the most unrealistic part of this whole game. Tangent aside, she uses her godlight to search the forest, spotting someone running into the darkness not too far away. Well, we spot the apparent person. Laura seems to be freaked out a bit, but she doesn't really call out the apparition, so we can only assume it was meant for the player more than the playee. She does call out Max, telling him that she thinks there's someone in the woods because she thinks she heard a woman's voice, and the pair debate whether they might have hit someone and whether that someone might be in the woods before Laura decides to go off into the dark woods alone, with Max being perfectly fine with that idea. And at this point, both of them deserve to be eaten by whatever is in the woods around Hackett's Quarry. Looking away from the road while driving was dumb, but separating in the dark woods, especially in an area that they aren't familiar with, is just asking for trouble. What if something happened and one of them fell and wound up injured, unable to call out? They are making all of the wrong choices, and there's no way either of them makes it to the end of the horror movie. The good news is that we find a tarot card in the madness, so at least we'll get to salvage something from this fiasco. Bumbling around in the dark forest, Laura comes across a poster for some old sideshow called Harem Scarum. And wait just 1 minute. That woman on the poster looks awfully familiar. I swear I've seen her somewhere before, but I just can't place my finger on it. Yeah, she's probably just got one of those faces. There's also an escapology trunk to be found, with the handcuffs likely giving Laura some ideas for how to handle Max and his sense of direction, but that'll have to wait for another time. Before long, the darkness starts to get to Laura, and she begins panicking as she hears whispers in the air around her, and thinks that she sees something behind a tree. Just as she's reached her limit, the horror of the moment really ramps up.
Silence!
Abandoning any semblance of bravery, Laura rushes through the forest, somehow managing to avoid breaking any bones or running into any spiderwebs, as she bolts through the darkness back to Max in the car. Thankfully, Max was able to get the car back in working order while she was gone, and at her urging, he hits the gas, only to discover that their situation is a little more difficult than he realized. The car isn't all-wheel drive, and since this is a horror game, they just had to come to a stop in the mud, meaning they're stuck spinning their tires when they should be getting out of there. Before Max can figure out how traction works, the pair are surprised by a face in Max's window that turns out to be a police officer coming to their rescue. Granted, the officer is kind of creepy and he appears to have blood on his neck, but he's willing and able to help them out by hooking his winch up to the car and pulling it back onto the road. Once all 4 tires are back on the pavement, the officer questions why they're out there that late, and shows his familiarity with the camp when he tells them that he knows they're a night early and that their best bet would be to stay the night at the Harbinger motel instead. Laura doesn't like the pushback she's getting, and talks back to the cop a bit before being asked to step out of the vehicle so the officer can mark the location of the motel on her map. All things considered, the officer is much more polite than he probably needs to be, given how rude the couple seems to be, but that's no doubt the famous upstate New York hospitality that we all know and love. After licking the pencil for some reason, he marks where they presently are and shows Laura where the motel is, before being tricked into nearly also marking the location of the summer camp. The cop recognizes her attempt, but not before she was able to note the location that he was about to mark in her head. Climbing back into the car and bidding farewell to the officer, Laura shows Max the location, and the pair set off to directly ignore the cop's instructions. Now, to be fair, the whole encounter does seem a bit odd, and for all they know, the man could just be pretending to be a cop, with the directions to the motel being nothing more than some kind of elaborate trap meant to provide victims to his secret serial killer friend. That might sound outlandish now, but just wait until we get further along. That theory kind of goes out the window when Max and Laura finally arrive at the summer camp, however, to find it completely empty. Laura said earlier that she'd spoken to Mr. Hackett about coming up a night early, but it turns out she'd only left a message on his answering machine because Hackett's Quarry summer camp is actually located in the year 1995. After snooping around a bit, Laura discovers what appears to be a person locked in the basement of the main building, and she and Max work together to break the lock off the door and go searching for the figure. But rather than finding a person in the basement, they discover a dog collar with the name Ian on it, as well as some bones that likely belong to the owner of the dog tag. And Max winds up being attacked by something. The attack leaves Max in pretty bad shape, and try as she might, Laura is unable to pull him up the stairs before the thing comes back for seconds. Laura barely has time to process what's happening when someone sticks a needle in her neck, and we find ourselves greeting our old friend the police officer, and he's not exactly happy to see us.
Does this look like the goddamn Harbinger motel to you?
A few hours later, Laura wakes up in a prison cell, covered in blood, and no doubt wondering how she managed to wind up in jail. It's a familiar question we've all asked ourselves at one point or another in our lives, especially after spending a wild night in Vegas with the boys, where the last thing you remember is Travis's mom slipping you a Benjamin before taking you back into the members-only room at the Bellagio. Sure, the money was good at the time, but when bail the next day was several $100s, it made you question all of your life choices and promise to never drink watermelon wine again. Where was I? Oh, Laura. As she's struggling to get up, she sees the cop walk by, dragging an unconscious Max behind him to a different cell down the block. She hears some struggling, followed by the sound of a jail door, and then the cop walks back by to let her know that things are about to get a little messy. It's not entirely clear what happens next, but there's a growl and a lot of blood, and all we can assume at first is that Max is probably not doing too well down there. But that gets brushed aside as Laura passes out again, waking up a few hours later, handcuffed to a chair as the cop tosses a cup of water on her. And I gotta be honest, I didn't see this game going in this direction. I thought it was a horror game, but it would appear that we're heading into... Oh, the cop's interrogating her. Obviously. I choose to be compliant because I've played Detroit Become Human, and I don't want to risk angering this cop in case he moonlights for the Detroit PD. This approach flusters him, though. He didn't expect me to be so compliant, so maybe he's not so bad after all. Though, in the course of the questioning, we learn that the cop, or rather sheriff, shares the same last name as the man who runs the summer camp. And now we can put at least a couple of things out there. For one, why in the hell didn't the cop at least try to make up some excuse for why they shouldn't have gone to the camp? He could have easily just been like, hey, Chris Hackett, the guy who runs the camp, is my brother, and he's not at the lodge. It's empty tonight and there's no getting in, so just go to the hotel. This is a pattern with these Hackett men, as Chris pulled something similar when he refused to give the counselors in an earlier episode more to go on than just go inside and stay there because I said so. Did no one think this whole mess out ahead of time? It's a wonder they haven't lost campers and counselors before now, given the threat in the area. The sheriff takes Laura back to her cell and we find out Max is alright, though he's naked and worried about what could have happened since the cell isn't exactly in great shape. There's blood everywhere and he doesn't remember the previous night after being attacked. There isn't much time to dwell on their situation though, as the sheriff returns with clothes for Max before taking him off to be questioned as well. At least Laura has some awesome poetry to read on the wall of her jail cell though.
While the town of North Kill lay there sleeping, the hag in the woods started weeping. As the bodies decay, the wolves hunt their prey, and the sheriff continues his creeping.
Aside from that, she also discovers a loose brick in the cell that's been hollowed out, and now I'm really curious to know who was in the cell before Laura. They didn't leave anything in the brick, but it seems like a really convenient hiding spot just to be left unused. After a while, Max is brought back to his cell, and the two have the chance to talk through a few things, including the sheriff's relationship to Chris Hackett, Max's failure to get into the school that they were supposed to be attending together in the fall, and what happened the night before. As they discuss what all went down, they focus on the thing they nearly hit in the road and the fact that the police station they are supposedly in is void of life except for themselves and the sheriff. But that isn't even the most interesting thing they discuss, as Max puts up an idea about the thing that attacked him and the reason he doesn't seem to have any injuries from that attack on his body less than 24 hours later.
Hey, okay, so weird question. Do you remember before we got lost?
You got lost?
Well, yeah, but before that, I was all like, whoa, look at the moon. It's so big, so cool to see a full moon in the middle of the woods. And you were all like, yeah, no shit, Max, it happens once a month.
Yeah, so?
Right, so, you know, full moon.
Yeah?
What if,
Okay. No. Stop.
I'm just saying, you know, maybe there's a slight chance it was a werewolf.
Werewolves? Seriously? What the fuck?
A few more weeks in captivity don't really help their situation, as Max and Laura spiral slowly into their own little version of hell. The cop keeps them fed and lets them shower, but they still have no idea why they're being detained or what really happened on their last night of freedom. They finally make the decision to try and get on the cop's good side, if he even has one, And it kind of makes me chuckle because all I can think of is how this would be some wild reverse Stockholm syndrome. Normally, the captives wind up sympathizing with the captor, but the sheriff wants nothing more than to keep his distance and bide his time with no rhyme or reason to the madness. Though, that does make me want to try even harder to get on whatever good side he may have, and now I'm wondering if the whole thing is some big psychological game where he only wants us to think that he doesn't want to be friends in order to make us try to be his friend, and I'm probably just really overthinking it now. A last-ditch effort by Laura to get Sheriff Hackett's attention results in him rebutting her claim that Max is a werewolf by telling her that she doesn't know the half of it, deepening the mystery and showing that we're on the right path. Not long after, the sheriff is in Max's cell, telling him to strip, and for a brief moment I flash back to being handcuffed in his office, and I need to remind myself that this isn't that kind of film. It turns out there's a full moon, and the officer is concerned about keeping the clothes that Max is wearing intact. The plan doesn't really work, and Sheriff Hackett finally resorts to handcuffing Laura to a heater pipe outside of Max's cell so that she can see what's going to happen for herself before abandoning the pair for the night, with a promise to return first thing in the morning. And okay, so we're just gonna leave the prisoners in this mess to fend for themselves now with no explanation? Actually, that's par for the course with the Hacketts, so carry on. Laura observes and tries to analyze Max's condition, but it escalates really quickly. And before she knows it, her boyfriend has covered her in a messy substance and she's looking a lot like a pirate. Again, not that kind of show. The sheriff didn't really take into account the fact that Max could reach through the bars in beast form, and he manages to claw Laura's face, significantly reducing her depth perception by scratching out one of her eyes and forcing her to seek out medical attention in the form of some self-care from a first aid kit in the bathroom, and just wow. So far from everything we've seen between Chris and Travis Hackett, their family shouldn't be allowed to run a lemonade stand, let alone a summer camp or sheriff's office. They're incapable of explaining anything with any kind of credibility, and Travis, the sheriff, didn't once think that there could be any possible issue with leaving one of his prisoners tied up just a couple of feet outside of the cell where the other would be transforming into a werewolf. The least that he could have done would be to stick around for the 5 minutes it would have taken for Max to change, so he could then lock Laura back up before leaving. Now she's scarred for life and lucky to be alive at all thanks to the carelessness and stupidity of the man they call the sheriff. After fixing herself up and showing incredible resilience by snooping around the station for some clue to the mystery of what's going on, Laura lies back down in her cell to wait for her inept captor to return. And when he does return, we finally get some answers as he loosens up with a bottle of whiskey and talks to Laura while Max watches a video of what we can only assume is himself transforming. The sheriff does kind of beat around the bush in a way, hinting at his family's involvement with the whole werewolf thing, but he stops short of giving us the full picture. Instead, he provides a poem that gives some indication of what we're dealing with.
Let's see how smart you really are.
What is this?
Information.
Well, what does it mean?
Read it.
When full the moon above shines first, the beast internal shall outward burst. One by one leads lambs to slaughter. It stalks your breath, but shuns clear water. And should you yourself be cursed, armed with silver and the first, when moon is full before its wane, rend the beast that cursed you slain. No longer shall you face your blight, or fear the dread of full moon's light. And if it's a bite with which you're faced, cleave limb from torso with great haste. Perchance you'll save your cursed soul before infection takes its toll.
Starting to get the picture.
It's not a lot to go on. And frankly, it's shit. Why did they have to make it rhyme?
Breaking it down, we're dealing with werewolves that transform at the full moon. If you wind up being bitten, you'll be cursed to transform as well. And the only way to cure the affliction is to kill the werewolf who bit you using silver during the full moon. This presents a bit of a problem, as it might be kind of hard to hunt and kill the werewolf that cursed you when you yourself are a mindless beast out hunting prey. Going further, we also find out that you can avoid turning into one, even if you've been bitten, by cutting off the part the werewolf bit. Meaning, we made the right call by cutting off Dylan's hand in the last episode. But we also get even more info as Laura overhears Chris and Travis arguing later on. Chris has figured out that Travis has the missing counselors locked up, and he isn't happy about it. Apparently, Travis has been keeping their presence in the jails a secret from even his family, and it turns out that Chris is the one who bit Max in the first place. Of course, that means that in order to cure Max, Chris is going to have to meet his end during the next full moon. But in order to make that happen, Laura and Max need to escape. That isn't really too difficult now, as Laura managed to stash one of the sheriff's knockout syringes in the hollowed-out brick on the night that she lost her eye, but I wound up making it a little more complicated because I wanted to see if there was a way to escape that involved working with the sheriff. It turns out that there isn't, and after stealing his gun, locking him in the cell that he'd been holding Laura in for weeks, freeing Max, and stealing some ammo and guns, we hit the road to hunt down Chris Hackett. Laura went straight for the quarry, leaving Max to his own devices on the island and making her way back to find Chris Hackett before the moon gave way to the sun the next morning. And that's where Laura catches up with our beloved group of misfits in the pool changing room, after killing a werewolf that turned out to be Kaylee Hackett, the niece of Travis and the daughter of Chris. She and her brother Caleb are apparently also werewolves, and this whole thing is just getting messier by the minute. And in case you hadn't put two and two together yet, Max is the werewolf that Emma ran into on the island. Now, we know that Emma made it off the island alive, but no one else knows that yet, so we'll just keep it to ourselves for now. To make matters even worse, Laura went back to the island after killing Kaylee, thinking that she'd taken out Chris, only to discover that Max is still cursed and getting herself bit in the process. And that revelation doesn't sit well with the group, but we won't get to see how they respond until the big finale next Friday. So the picture is starting to clear up just a bit. We know that at least 3 of the Hacketts are werewolves, and one of them is now dead. Max is hanging out in the moonlight on the island after biting Laura, who is now racing the sun and the clock before she turns and has to wait for another month to try again. But we also know that both Nick and Emma had brushes with werewolves, meaning that 2 members of our group are also in danger of being cursed long term if we can't take out the wolves that bit them before the night is over. To make sure that you don't miss out on discovering who lives and dies next week, hit that like button and subscribe. You can also help cure someone of the werewolf curse by joining as a channel member or a patron, helping to ensure that I can buy enough silver to end the curse while also getting cool perks like early access to videos, your name on the screen, and even more. That's all I've got for this one. Keep an eye out for the members of the Hackett family, and I'll see you in the next one.